Nice. Good. Jacob, good. Cool. I'll start. Part 1 market-based education is an oxymoron. It distances from innovative solutions and authentic desires true. The right wants to take control of particular modes of desire compatible with market values. School becomes a reproductive school with the belief that the market governs all social life. Schools are public spaces that odds with market rationality. The public sphere is an enemy to the market and produces people who can imitate and act. Otherwise, it's crucial to make sure visible, not just material relation to power, but the ideologies that legitimize it and destroy the social state. He has critical pedagogy, rejects the notion of students as passive containers and simply abide by dead knowledge. Learning is more expansive struggle for the social justice. Education must be an administrative project to reject corporatization of schools. The role of the judge to resist predatory capitalism, which means they must use the right to challenge all-encompassing market ideology. A specific form of cap precludes counter rules like go for the better material consequences. Since we can't know which ones are good unless we know whether our desires are authentic or conditioned, and that works any type of pleasure. It promotes one-dimensional militarism and kills all value like box 1. In capitalist one-dimensionality, consumption is so dominant that people forget about the ultimate values of the way it organizes. In the wealthy land word is repressed change. People no longer receive contradiction between things how they are and how they might be, with resulting flattering of the conflict between the given and the possible. He has a society where entirely free people do work that would suit their interests. Now it means making money are in the hands of few, and workers become alienated from control over their work to conform to society. Individuals must repress which is enforced by a particular group, sustaining its privileged people to rectify false means settled into the happy consciousness no longer wonders whether there are alternatives to the scope. The cheerful robots and antithesis of the free. The role of the ballot is to endorse the debater who better promotes ideology of authentic freedom. This means voting for the debater who offers better response to manufacture contempt into the good that lets people find their own genuine desires and filter material impacts through that lens. Part 2. Business is booming. The U.S. is a global leader of arms sales to Wanda Ribbon 324. The U.S. supplied the most weapons to the Middle East. U.S. accounted for 69% of the arms imports to Israel. And the mass killings of Palestinians, major arms imported by the Middle East buyers in the last 10 years have been used by widely in the conflict in the region. And it's not just about weapons. Arms sales are a core form of military presence that lock in a revolving door of corruption. Zenko. In the Middle East, U.S. military presence is not only physical, its presence is also in the form of weapons sales, training, and advice, reciprocal relationship ensures that U.S. military access to a range of activities. Yet, the most expansive legal and politically consequential component of the U.S. corporation within the Middle East is from exports of weapons. Sustained military-to-military relationship for the entire life cycle of those weapons, such as training, upgrades, and targeting, support regional militaries by U.S. weapons to the relationship that comes with them. Internally, U.S. sells the weapons to earn more money and support the revolving door between military servants and vets. In 2004 to 80% of the retired generals took jobs with defense contractors. Many of the positions are within military firms that train Middle Eastern military. That corruption kills. The revolving door creates a military-industrial complex that causes death for profit, and root cause of conflict for vengeance. In 2019, 50-hour conflicts that caused 150,000 deaths in Syria. There have been at least 384 casualties resulted in the armed violence in Yemen, and 232,000 armed conflicts in the arms BFCs would be impossible without the cause collusion between manufacturers and politicians whose close relationships have minimized by the revolving door ministries of defense, maintain military muscle to activate to achieve political objectivities, and finds a clear correlation between arms exporting armed conflicts to MIC, engineered securitization to achieve multi-million budgets for the purchase of its products and secure its business. This denies both consent and descent to create technocracy and permanent securitization. James 1. Marcuse pointed to the permanent defense economy as a central factor in the involvement of the military experts behind the technological veil, making decisions about life and death over which the public has no control. Marcuse saw the tensions as a tool of controlling dissent, mobilized dissent that threats capital society as well as the internal union, like the superhero that has just been destroyed by the last cartoon night. The U.S. entered dangerous from militarism with the invasion of Iraq based on unilateral military action against a perceived threat, and that creates cycles of violence and seeks permanent securitization profits from preserving extinction level threats. Box 2. The MIC calls to the enemy against whom prevailing conditions are to be defended. The enemy becomes internalized, permanent in the normal affairs. He adds in setting it makes sense for this means sense to train people from an early age fear and hate the other master skills needed to fight the internalized patriotic entitlements. Of course, the world that is conforming to the natural and idealistic military societies from the commercial interests we look to the contemporary U.S. Thus, they affirm result: the United States ought to substantially reduce its arms sales in the West Asian North Africa region. Hearten. The impetus move of arms that surpass the staggering weapons bases will only lead you to more arms corporations. It should be the government imperative guards to fight against the future of rush to SL. Evermore weaponry only increase the risk of the country will become embroiled by more conflicts, raising the arms industry obscures the numerous ways to undermine security rather than remain assessing the MIC. It's in time to place it under greater control. Part 3. The app makes change possible. A new form of U.S. policy and rupturing of arms sales can follow. Satya 1. Rethinking arms, remaking foreign policy in a different post-colonial world that to hold the U.S. and its industries to account awareness of collective complacency and balance is just an opportunity to revisit lost cause at the end of the war in the empire. The arms manufacturing the kids left to both navigate towards different morality. Governments had the option of promoting growth through the contracts welfare rather than welfare warfare, including education, healthcare, and infrastructure. After World War I, defeated the German arms makers turned swords into plowshares by making surgical instruments of the world-faced environmental devastation. Plowshares are more crucial to security than ever. U.S.'s environmental, renewable energy, and green tech is really undermined underneath the ambition for the Middle East, and we promote accountability through diplomacy and investigations into rights abuses. Page. Since 2015, Human Rights Watch documented how Saudi and the UAE-led coalition U.S. weapons and war crimes. HRWR called for the suspension of all sales to Saudi and the UAE, renewing U.S. offensive weapons sales to undermine Biden's promise to prioritize human rights rather than reducing the offensive arms sales. U.S. should push for getting a UN accountability mechanism that would investigate violations and support for the future prosecutions. Next, reducing arms sales lets the U.S. redirect resources to can fund social services instead of death and reform its global position as a rights violator. June. Arms sales and men have been frequently associated with rights abuses due to the autocratic nature of many people. Many purchasing countries' leaders use import weapons against their own citizens. The war in Yemen has raised arms civilian casualties. The EU has a resolution calling the arms embargo to Germany, Norway, and Belgium have enacted the transition, even as Trump losing their arms trade restrictions on the rights abuses, including Bahrain and Saudi. Arms purchases divert resources that might otherwise be spent on social needs, including education and health. Saudi is pursuing the need technology realized by developing more resources to education and social programs to bring security needs to start under control, and we make alternatives possible, preserving corporate militarism stops us in our tracks. James 2. Our imagination of peace is limited by our massive economically motivated organization for replacement of concurrence with preemption, access to citizenry to trust, policymaking for determinant of the threat of wars and first strikes, consolidation of the power of technical solutions, and the powers that can be the enemy with the possibility of real liberation, making calculations about how millions will be annihilated in a nuclear war that's has given way to a society with a line of separating citizen and enemies disappear. The suppression of rights is embraced in the name of security, but affirming rejects this form of colonialism and makes arms sales the basis of U.S. imperialism and want us to too. The actual purpose behind arms sales has been securing American imperial power. The U.S. military is a single large consumer of fossil fuels, oil companies depending on starting money, so does the tech industry. Starting money is a single large funding source of U.S. startups, playing on how the industry figure in the imperial power of the Arab being peninsula, forcing a reckoning with the U.S. relationship where these countries have as much cooperation with Saudi, the controlling arm making modern empire and industrial capital is actively apparent to the card there. And next, the absence is a chance for structural change, restricting arms sales, be driving towards new cultural and institutional norms. Sure too. Resistance can only take place if the political is made pedagogical. Matters of education take the center stage in the struggle for desires to earn peace. Normalizing violence. This complex must be addressed by making visible military networks. Equally important is the need to shed the light about how the MIC uses punishment and structuring to shape the policy. Challenging war facing has also been important to the educational component. Crucial is the need to develop new vocabularies that can foster engaged citizenship capable of naming the corporate interest that support the war facing one central pedagogical task, dismantling the creating cultural warring conditions that can enable move towards being of spectators of war. Cut the card.
Spectators of war, right?
Yeah.
Okay, starting across, what arms sales does the United States have to West Asia and North Africa?
Sure. The Zenko evidence and the Redmond evidence indicates how 69% of arm imports by Israel amid the Palestinian genocide conflict are a result of the United States. That is a massive export of arms sales. Additionally, the Zenko evidence. No, the Zenko evidence indicates that a major form of U.S. presence in the region come from arms sales. Arms sales are a core
which
form of
countries
presence.
receive arms sales from the United States?
Sure. I guess that the 1EC Zenko evidence indicates how arms sales as a structure in regards to a lot of countries kind of carry over into the ways that conflicts function in the region. The Redmond evidence is the example of Israel as a statistic, but there are many more that the Zenko evidence talks about, but it's not in red in the 1EC.
Extinction level threats, it's from 2002. Which ones does the United States preserve by?
Which evidence are you talking about?
Box.
Yeah, which box 2?
Yeah, this
Yeah, the box 2 evidence is an indication of the violence that comes from things like arms sales. The state is in a permanent securitization profit from preserving extinction level threats. We can contextualize this to the status quo, where the U.S. is constantly funding countries like Israel for a profit motive, as per all the warrants in Part 2.
Wait, the 1EC says that the only reason the United States continues to fund arms sales to Israel is for profit?
Our argument is that a root cause to a lot of the impacts that come from military presence happening in the region can be explained by the increase in drive to
So the
create
only reason the
military
United States
industrial
globally supports Israel is because of the profit that they
No, that's not what I said. We said that a lot, in regards to specifically arms sales, that is a way to drive profit motives. The 1EC's
But
framework,
then what is the
the
root
1EC
cause? Just
framework
make a root
mechanism
cause.
has, sure, a lot of the violence that is happening in the region, or a majority of the violence that's happening in the region, comes from arms sales. The 1EC has chosen to defend things like arms sales as per the framing mechanism that talks about why things like capitalism inside of education tamper with our conception of what good is. That is why the 1EC has chosen things like arms sales, because it is a specific way that we can address the topic through that framework.
What does the affirmative solve about the conflicts?
What do you mean? Arms sales reduces a lot of the impacts that come from Part 2. The Satya 1 evidence talks about how the reduction of arms sales can make change possible. A central thesis claim that the 1EC is making is that the reason that we haven't seen things like new and authentic motives and money spending in regards to the status quo is because the US is so occupied with things like arms sales. The Satya 1 evidence talks about how a possibility of the AF can be repurposing foreign policy towards things like diplomacy, towards things like green tech, towards things like energy. Those things aren't happening in the status quo because we're so predisposed to fund arms
Does
sales.
the plan say that it would result in things like that being invested in, or are those
The 1EC doesn't fiat those
No,
consequences.
but my question is does the 1EC defend those?
The 1EC opens the door for those possibilities to
Sure,
happen.
that's fine. The rule of the ballot, like, what does it mean?
Yeah.
Endorse the debater who promotes.
We offer a better response to manufactured conceptions of the good and let people find their own desires. The Giroux evidence talks about how right-wing leaders and right-wing forms of education spill over into educational spaces that prevent people from forming their own conceptions of the good. Additionally, the Box 1 evidence contextualizes this to military presence. It says that it promotes one-dimensionality and kills all value to life, which means we control the internal link to the impacts the 1EC would probably agree.
4:30 left also. Six of these. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Let me know what it said.
It's cool.
I'm good whenever these scheme panel competitors are.
Just give me 1 second.
How many more?
6.
Is there an order on case you want us to?
Not really.
Okay, that's fine.
Alright,
Write
here
it
we go.
down.
Everyone's
Yeah.
New apps are voting issue justified negatives and leniency on the acceptance and idea the affirmative TOC becomes infinite pure peppers of 5 minutes negatives are forced to resort to generics because of absence of ability to class. That means that you should also reject one of your APIs and the compatibility to testing apps without the fear of losing or vibrating position negatives increase the force in obscene positions because the burden of rejoining a punishment for that brings dominance to the next military versus bases and troops broad consisting along 11 acknowledged by either the studies the term military versus refers to bases directed of all military conflicts sovereign states by another the misuse to refer to armed cells neither is defined with the military versus violation of the affirmative defense only armed cells limits that it explains armed cells experience the topic from the after 20 expanding solvency room conditions military or missile defense stress every core link based on troops and their assurances and disadvantages relies on boots on the ground directly the team tuners to the stress from crash with runners from these cubes blaze armed troops officer increase to reasonable for the logical argumentation average discourse from city comic is based on really free of next extension risk always for correct 17 we are expected by weighing probability against verdict access to risk to liberty equity catastrophe gives future generations nothing advanced underestimates SSN risk or not only this ability to assume that something is important for computer cost given the exercise benefits little perfect response or numbers saving lives numbers getting large and catastrophic risks are systemically underrated by 16 the ultra risks are not experienced this is experts applying the quantitative methods while public teams less interested describing the risk in speech is less effective at stimulating reaction the prefrontal cortex is drawing experience about the brain is available events even within certain areas of availability neglect last compounding disdain for warnings the second expecting psychology the impacts you'll know because the last no number response to overwhelming the end of the world is too much for destabilizing rather than mobilizing the reflexing people in the world of their capacity probably may be eager to save the refugee without willing to save the unidentified population the existential risk is a single individual and the joint chiefs of staff should recommend the United States substantially reduces arms sales in West Asia North Africa the president refers to JC's recommendations to politically costly to oppose fringe 22 civilian leaders refer to military expertise Obama and Trump defer the military has monopoly over expertise and leaders refer to adopt military preferred option direct opposition civilian waste military expertise highly it is politically challenging to oppose beneficial line and insult Newport tier failed states alliance class fever 21 TMR provides effective security policies great conflict and stability allies WDs tier failed states to navigate tricky water for the professionalism to caution and humility neglected no allows for intolerable costs and the counterparts of central sequence it solves military deference favor and code 21 trust is universal solvency of each party generally seek mutual understanding trust is usually built through action trust means to be delayed by a step-by-step process must be filed in advance the military must be initiated and Kosovo persistent and all implies certain immediacy and scrutiny Govic 19 and Kosovo means analysis and charter trust immediately next unite with the 1AC basis to ontological design there the death of politics eliminating Promethean more step field 19 the piecemeal technological adjustments of our future society because the cautious Prometheus was trapped into this power system way to hear the ontologics or designer or critical society within the death of politics Promethean victories of World War II and the Cold War drivers of institutional mastery the fourth comes for ecological crisis enemies human behavior created by government's precarity and the reinforced military industrial logic cementing the control of conditions to execute across 12 problem solving logically to entire functioning of the MIC not in opposition to accepting underlying control of the game arms controls regulating the certain use of arms reinforced by sovereign state power their political accountability comes from the same political frame armed control is promised to the national security goals unable to make a large leap in disarmament the cost of surrounding the population increase international in order they're vulnerable to a nuclear holocaust in the name of security the survival of the entire population at risk makes the proxy wars creating exclusionary fire breaks and only the alternate rejection of the third mode of demilitarization telling 11 the reality global interconnection suggests the importance of political movements that arms trade is general as a particular campaign in which focus on Chinese actions and geopolitical arguments and mutual reinforcements the shipping of products holds an alternative division of arms control that are not about the American military dominance and surveillance the regimes do not rely on maintaining existence geopolitical order the assumption of arms and
control can be under arms control is not clearly and not continues to pose options about competitive state actions and more obstacles about more the realistic are in the name of the time game is precisely the problem. Multilateral arms control has dissipating dangerous political predispositions and our interpreters judge should evaluate what he sees as a scholarly artifact for their compatibility to Neil and Starvinsky 17 engaging in others is a term to be heard around the arms is debate about Mayor's radical views could not be translated into policy. The research on imperial relations and nationalism has been removed from policy paper. Paradigm compatibility is allowing for receptible to be on their own control within the system of relations. Expert was not disconnected from political terrain rather than violently. The research needs to be used for state policy that is criterion that research holds civil society to account. Next, the Westlake was the only reason that's why Israel's response to it goes all escalation and could not discord. 419, the Israel launched a barrage. Israeli wants to be media about a counter barrage, but under immense pressure, provided they waited. Israel response was viewed as Israel sent a message around us. Then there's not one escalation. Next time, maybe not for the plans. Here's capital to 22 Biden has drug critics and restarting dialogue with allies and domestic concerns, leaving residual diplomatic capital for issues abroad. Gold states are wearing the ship military arms, even if focus on drawing it seems less likely that Washington is aware of its security vacuum. Biden wants to reach a military presence and needs to convince partners to take responsibility for security. Biden must be given the partners credible reassurances and commitments. And exigent CPI 23 Israel Hamas implications beyond the Middle East tensions are Ukraine, strained Chinese relations. The nuclear weapons Netanyahu Hamas opportunity to attack the Middle East as a hotspot for a global nuclear war that causes back to Beijing and Moscow tensions escalate. The case about the role of Allies for the render debate. Anything else justifies the role of Allies for me to arbitrate based on the topic. And it's also also the role of Allies in a way that judge can evaluate the round if both sides are both equally showing like authentic freedom, which also isn't something justified in evidence, which means it's endlessly, which proves arbitrariness. The framing issue for the case is that they cannot solve any of their advantages based on their impacts are based on Israel and Hamas conflicts, etc. But they have not drawn a causal solvency claim because they have not shown that the United States is only basing its support of that based on profit, which is something that they failed to explain across the examination, which means that they're lacking an interlink to solving any of their impacts. Are reflexive and effective under 15 practice of informed decision making, broader scholarship, improves policy performance, evidence by building working on predicted outcomes. There's a danger not so appreciating research, quantitative techniques for crafting policy back. Research makes for valid policy technical methods, make counter inferences, empirical lies are on the line. IR research is the only way to evaluate them effectively. No cost for nuclear war. Horgan 14 scholarships identified college costs of war scholars explain the social trace of each area can find evidence, but there's no explanation for other accounts for diversity where the working propagate independently of social factors cause causation, backwards war promise, promotes inequality, and the solvency leadership circumstances claim to pay in 23 senior officials of civilian responsibility mobilize public opposition relies on allies and Congress retired military officials searching implementation adopting a military preferred option and PMCs in cohort 23 contractors are crucial component of war in terror. Syria has no hunter them only military officials, not private contractors, not worried about how many troops are within Syria. Pentagon has deployed a new form of privatization of war and even minor reductions of military presence locking Israeli preemptive strikes extinction McConnell 17 the greatest threat to stability Israel is in history. Israel's unity terrified of being left alone. Its suspicion to use its attractive ways intensities aggressively. Israel need constant reassurances and just without restraint Israel becomes a cataclysm to nuclear weapons to extraordinary advantage. The Israel nuclear desperado striking the Gulf cannot be dismissed.
Yeah, I'm good for cross.
Cool. Whoops. Alright. Everyone good for cross? Okay. I'll start cross. Okay, what's the link to the fourth critique?
Yeah, sure. It's that the affirmative's claim of limiting arms control to be solving things like Israel obfuscates the problem, which is the military-industrial complex.
This card seems to be in the context of like calling for ends to arms sales through the justification of like providing deterrence. Where does the 1EC do that?
The 1EC says that it resolves conflicts within the Middle East.
Why is it the same as advocating for a reduction of sales to like increase deterrence?
You're saying that you're preventing conflicts, which we say is the same
So
logic.
answer the question. What's the status of the alt?
Condom.
What does it do?
The alternative rejects the affirmative's mode of demilitarization.
What does that look like? Like, is there an example of that working? How is that contextualized to like the real world or the round?
Yeah, sure. In the round, it rejects the forms of like seeing arms control reduction as a solvency claim, which is framed through the.
What does that? What does that mean though? What does the 1EC alternative do in regards to the violence that arms sales create?
What does the alternative do?
What does the alternative do? What does that mean though? How does that stop the violence that comes from arms sales?
Well, it problematizes the campaigns that the affirmative would endorse, which.
That doesn't answer the question. How does that stop the violence from arms sales?
Yeah, it prevents the campaigns that the affirmative has, and instead is a move away from the military-industrial complex as a whole.
Okay, that's fine. What's the status of the JCS counterplan?
Conditional.
Why does the GCS say yes?
Because it's politically costly to oppose recommendations, and it's politically feasible and empirically proven through Biden's acceptance.
Okay, so when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan, some members of the JCS said that we should keep some residual presence there because we didn't, and we didn't see extinction. What's the warrant for the GCS counterclaim? Or is there
Are you
like
saying,
an?
are you saying empirics?
I guess empiric past examples of when the U.S. didn't consult the JCS and there hasn't been things like extinction. What does the
Well,
one?
Afghanistan was much different than the plan because they blamed Trump.
Where is
It was-
any of this evidence contextual to withdrawal
I'm
from
just-
the entire and about arms sales?
Well, okay, about arms sales,
Yeah,
it's
you-
just
you-
about generally the president defers to JCS because civilian leaders like Biden have empirically deferred.
If there are
to military
specific
officials and they value their
instantiations
expertise
as to
more.
when extinction happens or not, given that the 1NC evidence isn't about arms sales, what's the impact?
It currently, or it increases CMAR relations.
That's fine.
Which is the internal net benefit.
Cool. This third off, both cards say that extinction risks are underestimated. What does this mean?
Yeah, sure. It says that there's a psychological bias to not prefer existential risks because when you look at
Policy-
a group of say 50 people, they're united.
Sure.
People can do
I
that,
can
but
guarantee
existential
that
risks
like
are negative.
300 extinction debates total has happened across all events at this tournament. Why does that mean that extinction impacts are underestimated?
Like we've read a psychological study of how people view existential risks.
Then how does that study
Because if
explain the
people have debated
constant
about
extinction
that-
rounds that people debate about?
Like, what does people debating about existential risk have to do
It's
with the
fine.
way that people psychologically perceive them?
All right. Running 5 minutes prep. Starting. Okay, 144 left. Okay, I'll send parts. Let's put it in the body. The order will be case, and then the offs going top down. Okay. Cool. So when everyone's ready, then I'll start. Jazzy, Jacob, good? Alright, I'll start. None of the 1 and C's arguments were intended to be linked under a roll of ballot, so if I win a risk of freeing, I automatically win the debate. The roll of ballot to endorse the debater who better promotes an ideology of authentic freedom, corporatist education, which is modes of desire, consistent with the market that forces people to submit to the state. This kills all value to life, which is internal, which controls the internal link to their extinction arguments. The structure creates one-dimensionality where people become passive actors and never imagine alternatives to the status quo. This takes out their model of policy making. This is about how we shape the education and how we embody politics inside of this round. Innovative solutions and good policy making require a framework because market ideology hinders our desires of productivity, which turns the internal link to their roll of the ballot. They say that we're vague. One, we'll turn this back. Their roll of ballot doesn't give a metric for who the debater is. It doesn't tell you how to evaluate those arguments. You presume our roll of ballot to be true because basically the better debater is the one who better promotes things like authentic freedom and rejects things like capitalism inside of the debate space. Independently, market-based education immediately stops genuine desire. If their framework like maximizing well-being is about recognizing well-being, people aren't acting based on what they actually want, which turns internally to use in the first place. The offense, arms sales are root cause of violence in the MIC and lock in one-dimensional predatory capping. They create permanent securitization. They deny dissent and force submission. The plan is an alternative to capitalist militarization. It ends arms sales to WANA. It forms opportunities for new uncompromised federal policy, prevents human rights abuses through diplomacy, and lets U.S. direct resources to fund social services. The line by line, they say that there's no causal solvency claim. One AC evidence says that the U.S. has a profit motive. That was the Redmond evidence in the Zanko and Rufanchi's evidence, which talks about how the U.S. is constantly trying to maintain a revolving door. But even if this is responsible, because we're still winning that arms sales cause violence in the region, which is an independent impact in itself. The IR's effective argument one, we never said the IR was bad. This is just a non-starter. The argument about there's no root cause of war. One, we don't make a claim about any new war impact, which doesn't matter. They say that leadership circumplants the plan. One, no, this isn't true. One, the United States is unique root cause of things like arms sales happening in the region. It owns the majority of the presence there. So this argument is also not responsible. Do more on the JCS counterplan. The PMC fill-in argument. One, extend the PMC's fill-in argument doesn't matter. Extend Zanko arms sales reform of almost all military personnel and creates a revolving door. This link turns PMCs. PMCs are headed by people who used to work for the defense industry because of the revolving door, which allows for the revolving door to create more impenetrable cooperation. So we resist the impact that PMCs cause. Also, to the extent the Israeli preempted first strikes argument, this doesn't make sense under the act because it wasn't intended under the rule of ballot. The off case. Stidham new has bad. One, counter-interpret the AFNI not disclose new asks if they haven't read them before. If the AFNI defense core parts of the topic literature. Second, installs clash and fair shiftiness. Arms sales are the biggest part of presence. That was Zanko in the app that was conceded. And the counter-standard is perhaps Q. If we disclose the app, you get to prep out each area and you have zero way to combat it since you never read it before. We already said that we don't know what the next strat will be, so you get a huge advantage. The second off. 180 arms sales are a core part of U.S. President Zanko. Current passage of the U.S. to the military region routinely operate undercover activities in the form of facility, weapons training, enhanced military perimeter capabilities, mandates permanent access. The term limits. The standard is also the standard is about aid, and we're talking about sales. Also, if we win, this is key to the topic that's then broken in the app. Additionally, there's so much literature about arms sales. Israel Palestine asked for the context of arms sales, which means that you could have easily used those definitions and asked. So, prefer our definition. Theirs has no intent to exclude. The third off one is to link extinction level threats form a state securitization that lets the MIC function. The apps turn to all of this framing as per part one that was conceded. Second, we control the internal link to extinction. Arms sales escalate violence and increase the risk of extinction. They say that extinction debates are constantly are underestimated. The reason that extinction debates constantly happen disproves their psychological evidence that they went for in the 1 and T. The next off, drop them for the JCS one. Drop them. It's Plan Plus. It's just doing the app and consulting. There's zero reason why this competes with the 1 and T. Adding condition to the app and steal all app ground. This is also permutation to the app and all non-competitive parts of the CP. Reduce presence and also the GCS recommend the reduction. Then FIBRA evidence is power tag. It doesn't say that. It doesn't mention GCS deterrence. Just as the pressure to navigate tricky waters. Which ultimately means it's not about which ultimately is not about the CP. The fifth off one. There's no link. We're not a politics of design. This conditions for extinction already exist. Krauss is a non-unique argument. The question is whether there was another opposition that resolves the MIC. The alternative vague alter a voting issue dropped the debater. They just say to reject our method acting one of their own. It also creates imminent shiftiness since they all can be whatever they want it to be. It also sends all the app and links it back into their own critique. This is just claiming that they're not solving anything. The next off of div cap 1, we're going to outframe this layer. We're going to outframe this layer. None of this was contextual to our capitalist framework, but independently there's no link. It's not about arm sales. The Jacobo evidence has nothing to do with that. So the app said an internal link and link evidence is specific to the app. You presume app evidence to be better understandable about it.
430. What was the firm text?
What?
What was the firm text on the KCS counterclaim? It was firm to the app and all non-competitive parts of the counterclaim.
Yes.
Is that all?
Yeah, that's it.
Voting issues were conditions, counterclaims, and big alts.
Yes.
issues. Like the voting issues, T, the critique, the
Sorry, when you say voting issues, you just mean like the one-on-one ones, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
not like you asked them.
critique, dissad, counterplan,
Here, let's, at least for me, start from the top. So voting issues, then T.
yeah, then, critique, dissad, counterplan, util, then the case. And I'll send the two referrals.
Is there an order to the pages for the voting issues? Because I upload one on the K page and one on the counterplan page.
No, there's not an order.
Oh, okay. Just flow the overview on the T page, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that right?
Oh, wait, you sent it out, sorry.
Yeah.
Not going for now bound, but they justify terrorism and leniency on these sorts of jobs from the water, absent any idea of the affirmative perhaps he makes, even if pre-run preferences 5 minutes negative are forced to reach generic space on in absence of clash, which also means you should reject the voting issues because we have no way to be able to engage. It also means that all their abuse was self-inflicted because they decided not to disclose the affirmative. So obviously the negative is forced into positions that steal most of the affirmative, or positions that are obviously not justified or vague, that but forced on based on the not knowing the affirmative, which means that you punish for the breeds dogmatism, makes it possible for us to engage. Also, we need both of them. There's no bright line for a vague alternative. So you assume that we meet it also is a process counterplan, not a condition counterplan. They never define either. So at worst reject the argument, not the team. Offense index the counterplan, and the critique on the strategy dropped the debater forces the tuner to overcome theory to attraction and substance. If this gives the debate in their favor, the T shall not going for proving your topic is based on fairly fair, not a reason to vote for the critique kicking. It was conduct protest a competition, not a shift in advocacy. They just had conceding that it's outframed, so it doesn't matter. The counterplan. The counterplan PS, the Joint Chief of Staff, recommend a substantial reduction in military presence or a substantial reduction in arms sales in the West Asian North Africa region. That's all because it's politically challenging for presidents to reject recommendations, and recommendations reclaims civil military relations by creating a hybrid model that requires the military to civil interfacing before warfighting. Civil military relations outweigh one on probability. Extensive deployments are likely due to lack of commitments and miscalculation, large-scale conflicts involved in terrorism and deliberate escalation that in a variety of theories is exacerbating every impact that was fevered. And it makes the Israel-Hamas conflict even worse because there's a disconnect between the leaders who are enacting the policies and the military experts who are engaging with the policies, which means it's impossible for us to decentralize and reduce conflicts with the risk of conflicts in the status quo, which means that all their when you see impacts due to arms sales get even worse, and also solves circumvention, which I'll get to on case. The impact from the friend evidence is JCS bolsters civil military relations, which justifies the impact card about being about TMR. Also, it doesn't have to mention JCS, which answers their end, but also impact even doesn't matter. And if there's a deficit, so you should use sufficient framing sensors. No deficit tied to an impact or card from the 1AC. You should assume it solves all the case because, especially because he never said deficit in the 1 year. The counterplan the counterplan end to play. I'll justify the counterplan solves all the case. It justifies the recommendation for the president that empirically defers to, and there's political backlash against any officials or the president for non-compliance. It itself motivates the plan. The recommendation alone is sufficient to solve our interlinks. The president fears political backlash from voicing expert opinion, and they're implementing a policy for option even if they're opposed based on personal beliefs. Those one and T friend. The permutation is quote non-competitive parts of the counterplan is not justified. It's not a permutation text. It's not a permutation text. You should reject the framing issue for the permutation. It needs to be complete worlds in the 1 year or in the 1 year. Otherwise, it allows for infinite new two-year sandbagging, which is impossible because there's no 300 to answer it. So you should hold the line interplay. Now, best the permutation is just solves the counterplan equally, which means that the 1% risk of a deficit means that you should reject it interplay. They never define what non-competitive means, which is something that is their burden to prove, which means that they haven't met it. Which means you assume the permutation is just prone to the plan because the 1 and T and 2 will prove the reason that's why the counterplan is competitive, which means that the permutation is function just the app, and includes none of the counterplan that it's but interplaying the permutation serves the counterplan that fails to withdraw in compliance is not guaranteed. It's just like the counterplan is a recommendation, not a mandate, which is the friend evidence says the voter allows the app to be inflated, Sheffield avoids clash and rejects the ones of education over the intricacies of issues, and the app can't get a recommendation chance to 11 children and young release without limitations that do not include restriction because she was making only a recommendation and result is a synonym to enact by law. Words in phase of 64 and resolve is to enact by enact defined by established by law, which means that the counterplan's lack of fear and only recommendation means it never goes through the process process of law, so it doesn't matter. The next issue I have to win is extinction. 1% risk of the net benefit means that any percent risk of extinction is comparable to the affirmative's impacts to outweigh because it solves all of the case. Extinction has to outweigh. It's by far the worst possible thing to happen on Earth, even if they're right about, or even if they're right about the case impacts. Life can always get worse than if you're hailstorm, and human beings are burned to death, which means that if you have immense suffering for scavenging limited resources, and they inevitably die, which is which is the most painful experience that can possibly happen for all of us, which means that it definitely turns all the cases impacts, which are about things like capitalism, which are definitely much worse because profit incentives multiply in the world of a nuclear war and a nuclear conflict in which people are rushing to build things like nuclear weapons, which turns the case their indictment assumes implied defense, which was conceded. The result of existential risk is systemically underrated, which is why it's a psychological study, which means that talking about what debaters have done is not an analysis of how people generally see risk, which means that the reason why I assume the risk is lower is because of psychological intensive based on behavioral studies. Researchers conclude that neuroscientific responses to existential risk are viewed as less important to the public because there's no specific individual aim to attach or sympathy to. That means that our risk outweigh their authors are victims of mind numbing that results from high casualty predictions, but prevents effective policy and makes it worse and harder for us to prevent damage or prevent worse impacts, which means that outweighs. They say it's a form of state securitization. They have not justified or indicted to our specific analysis or impact scenario, which means it outweighs. It's about civil military relationships, which or even if it's about civil military relationships, they have not indicted that specifically, which means that you should hold the line, which specificity is something that the one has justified and explained to. They said that the act controls the interlink because it escalates violence. That means that they assume that accidents are possible, but they have never read a terminal for things like the conflict that the one C causes, which means it doesn't have a risk, or doesn't have a risk, which means that you should assume that the case outweighs how the case made proper. The counterplan solves circumvention, which was the Payne 23 evidence, is about how senior officials within the military evade civilian responsibility because they're able to mobilize public opposition and use people within Congress and enable connections to retired military officials to reverse the plan. The counterplan does the opposite because it does a recommendation through the JCS, which uses military elites, which means that they cannot circumvent their own recommendation, which means it does the opposite. But they have conceded it. They said the one error mistakes framework for solvency just because it doesn't assume your capital's will of law doesn't mean that it still doesn't indict the policy of the affirmative, which is the plan text, which is something that we say would get circumvented, which means that they solve none of our impacts, but the counterplan solves all of it. They also can't make a root cause claim that says that the only impact is people dying. It's not the same, so they have no solvency on the case. The framing issue for the role of ballot is completely arbitrary. The counterplan solves all the case, and there's no deficit tied to the role of ballot, so you should assume that it solves all of it independently and circumvents it, so they don't solve any of their role of ballot regardless.
Like 144 left. I'll take that. Okay. The order will be the case page, and I'll cover the framework section on top, and then the counter plan. Okay. then I'll start. Cool. I'll start. The reason you're voting out in this round is because of the framework. If I win that my evidence is the only side that has a unique internal link to things like reducing the military-industrial complex, it means that I automatically win the round. The framing of the 1 ER was that you should, none of the 1NC arguments had the intent of linking under a roll of ballot, which means that their scholarship does not translate into the ways in which they try to reduce things like the military-industrial complex. The role of the ballot to endorse innovative or better promotes an ideology of authentic freedom. Corporate education pushes modes of desire that consists of the market and forces people to submit to the state. This is about the ways that we shape education, how we embody our politics inside of this round. They have not clarified internally to what extinction does in regards to this round and how you as a judge have jurisdiction inside of this debate. They made a bunch of arguments about why extinction is bad and how it creates about things and why it kills people, but our argument isn't whether death is bad or not. It's about whether we should take priority over. It's a question of what we should take priority in solving. It's whether we should take priority in things like solving extinction or the immediate impacts like the ways in which the military-industrial complex root itself. The Giroux evidence uniquely indicates how we need to immediately resist things like capitalism that functions within educational spaces. In regards to the debates that we have about military presence, they say that we haven't specifically indicted their modes of extinction. Box 1 and Giroux are in the context of the ways in which militarism reproduces itself through educational spaces. People are always positioned to always look to market demands before the ways in which they can look to their own ways to affirm their own self-identities, which only the MIC can do really quickly. Arm cells are the root cause of violence in the MIC that lock in one-dimensional predatory cap because they create permanent securitization, deny dissent, and force into submission. They got in to try to go for the circumvention claim. They try to go for the circumvention claim on case will win that the 1AC's impacts outweigh 80% of the generals inside of the military-industrial complex in the status quo took jobs with defense contractors post-retirement. That form of circumvention and the same impact that comes from circumvention is happening right now in the status quo. Only the 1AC evidence that was conceded from Part 3 actually talks about arms sales and the actual plan that we defend. So they come first, prefer our evidence because it's in the context of the role of the ballot. Independently, this argument is not unique because the circumvention that is happening in the status quo comes from the revolving door, which the 1NC counterplan cannot solve. Go there now. You're voting affirmative on, here's why you're voting F on the counterplan. Extend perm to the F and all non-competitive parts of the perm to the F and all non-competitive parts of the alt. Pass the F as the law and have the GCS make recommendations about the specifics of what to do and to what to reduce and where. It's also 100% of their offense because the GCS will recommend doing the plan. Will recommend doing the plan anyway. I'll do the line by line. They say that no perm text. They say to reject it. They say that it allows new to in our sandbagging. One, no sandbagging. It's your fault if the F and the CP aren't competitive with each other. Next, you say that it just solves the CP equally. That 100% risk of a deficit means that they win. We are going for the vagueness argument that we made in the fever evidence. Remember that it was power tag. It's a conceded argument. It doesn't mention GCS defense. It just says that the president should navigate tricky waters. But second, it's not in the context of arms sales, which means that want to see evidence that specifically outweighs the chat. It's not evidence about how the F can't be a recommendation. It does not answer the perm because it's not in the context of the plan. It's in context of a general recommendation. And the words and phrases argument is not responsive because we still agree that policy action is important. All the points that talk about why the GCS is a substantial reduction, why it solves circumvention does not matter. Look, we're winning the framework debate. A framing issue for the 1AR is that the intentions of their arguments come first. Before extinction and before the net benefits, you look at evidence specificity, which only the 1AC does. Thus, we win the permutation. Good debate.